Hello and welcome back to 52 Topics with Frank Fiordolino. I am your co-host Brett of NYC Crime Spot. Like episode 1, this is still an audio-only podcast till further notice. However, if you are sitting down and watching this on YouTube, you will notice that I am still putting up a wide array of imagery and even some video clips for this particular episode you're about to enjoy. We want to say thank you to everybody who has left a comment, subscribed, and liked our video so far. We had a pretty decent first few days on this channel, so thank you all. And today, we got what looks to be a good one. We are going to be discussing the year 1986 in New York City, the Howard Beach racial incident, the Preppy Killer, Robert Chambers, the Miracle Mets, the Amazing Mets, the 1986 Mets who won the World Series, and at the end, we will be discussing some notable Italian organized crime events that transpired right here in New York City in 1986. We hope you enjoy it. Please leave a comment. Please leave a like. If it's your first time here, please subscribe. Thank you so much. Frank, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up, Brett? Nice to see you, buddy. Yeah, 1987. I'm kind of like psyched about this one because it takes me back to sophomore year of high school, and I remember this case very well. I do. It was a different time, and the racial climate in New York was pretty consistently. It was there. It existed, very much so. An invisible segregation at that. Yeah, we're gonna be going to Howard Beach, and before we do that, let's talk about the commissioner. We had Benjamin Ward was the commissioner, and Koch was the mayor back then, and they took a lot of crap. Benjamin Ward being African American himself, and Mayor Koch being American. But yeah, so let's get into this, man.
So you mentioned the racial stuff. This occurs in Howard Beach. If you guys are a little confused, yes, some 20 years later, there was another infamous racial incident that happened in Howard Beach, but this is kind of the OG Howard Beach racial incident. And at that time, Frank, Howard Beach, right? This
Sure.
is in December of 86. Gotti
Hmm.
is basically just completed his first year as the new boss of the Gambino crime family. He is
Right.
obviously residing in Howard Beach. That's his town, Cross Bay Boulevard, right over there. You have this situation where, of course, there's a lot of young, impressionable kids there. And Gotti kind of becomes like this, almost like this godlike figure, especially within that neighborhood. So tell me, Frank, about the culture of Howard Beach at that time and how that mafia aura is infecting the youth.
Well, going back to Gotti Mania. It was the beginning. We were a year into Gotti Mania. We go back to December of the previous year, and of course that famous assassination at Sparks. So what's it do? Okay, let's get to Howard Beach first. Howard Beach is a place where it always had mobsters living there, but it was kind of a haven for these mobsters and gangsters. Either they be made or bosses or even associates would bring their families there. It was I would say high middle class at one time. You know what I mean? And they would live there. And a lot of these gangsters grew up in a lot of neighborhoods like East New York or the Bushwick areas, and there was a lot of good business. There was a lot of legitimate business people too, but they lived there, so their kids didn't have to grow up the way they did. But here's John Gotti Mania. He's on TV, and all shit breaks loose. The media makes that neighborhood what it is. As far as the young generations getting impressed, I feel impressed. And then it just spread out. I mean, there was two big stories back then. There was the John Gotti, and there was the New York Mets at '86. So I'm kind of like I was like I said, I was at Christ the King High School, and it was pretty. It was a pretty exciting time. Pretty like weird time as well, and I'll get to that. It was special, and aside from, of course, the Howard Beach case, a young man died. We're gonna go through this. Let's break it down.
Yeah, let's go through this. So, and in with that mob stuff, I mean, just like any neighborhood in New York City, kids have
Mhm.
this opinion that they rule the neighborhood, this is our blocks, this is our shit. And
Yes.
when outsiders come in, things could happen, especially back then. If they were of a different color, it just can make people more emboldened to do things. And that's the premise of today. So let's break it down. Howard Beach, December 19th, 1986, flowing into the early morning hours of December 20th. So there's going to be four individuals who are actually going to cruise on Cross Bay Boulevard through Howard Beach in the 10 o'clock hour of December 19th. Now, these individuals are coming from, I believe, St. Albans, Queens, another part of Queens, kind of the Jamaica area of Queens. And they're traveling in a Buick, right? In a Buick Regal, a 76 Buick Regal. We have Curtis Sylvester, 18 years old. He is the owner of the Buick Regal. We have 23-year-old Michael Griffith, cousin of Curtis Sylvester. We have 18-year-old Timothy Grimes. And we have the oldest gentleman with the bunch, Cedric Sandiford, 36 years old. And what these guys do is they're making their way through Cross Bay Boulevard. And for anyone who has been around there, you kind of know the geography of what we're talking about. They're going through Cross Bay Boulevard, heading towards the Rockaways. They're going to hit a bump in the road halfway there. The car's going to break down in Broad Channel. Owner of the car, Curtis Sylvester, he's going to stay behind. Michael Griffith, Timothy Grimes, and Cedric Sandiford are going to make their way back to what we would call civilization. Being where they're stuck, there's really nothing there. So these guys got to take about, I mean, I looked at it on Google. It's about a 3 mile to 3.5 mile walk from Broad Channel to Howard Beach in order to find a phone or some sign of life. And once again, anyone that knows the geography, if you're stuck in the middle between like the Broad Channel, the Rockaways, and Howard Beach, there's a lot of stretch of land. Frank could attest to this. There's a lot of stretch of land where there is nothing there, even today.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to real quick, but yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of bodies were dumped there at those weeds back in that.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
for
that makes
real.
sense. Yeah, so you have one lane going one way, one lane going the other way. You have all the marshland to the left and right, which is now a National Wildlife Refuge. And then ultimately you hit a bridge that's going to take you back into Howard Beach, into civilization, right? So these
Mhm.
guys got a hell of a walk for them in December. It's probably cold. There's no phones around. They're going to make their way through Howard Beach. They arrive back into Howard Beach. And they're going to get into a little bit of an incident on Cross Bay Boulevard with a car that is passing by, Frank.
Right. So there's a car with one of the individuals we're gonna touch on right now, John Lester. John Lester, also known as Johnny English, was bringing a girl home and with a friend of his that was driving. On the way, they see the three black men allegedly, and they just go off on them with the N word. They start saying, "Get out, get off our block, get off of Cross Bay Boulevard," and they just keep going on and on. So they go away, and little did they know, after they dropped this one girl off, not the second girl, which I actually went to school with, but I'm not going to mention her. At Christ the King, shout out to whoever. So they bring this one girl home. While they bring this one girl home, little did they know they're going to this alcohol fueled party with about 15 to 25 young white males, teenagers. I could have easily been in that party if I would have been invited. Who knows? They go there. Meanwhile, we go back to the three black men in Griffith, Sanford, and Grimes. They're looking for a payphone. So we discussed this. Oh, we are talking about they're looking for a payphone, but this is 1986. There must have been a lot of payphones on Cross Bay Boulevard. How do they end up at New Park Pizza? Because there's a lot of space between, like, the Bow Wow used to be there. I remember that. That was on one side to New Park Pizza. Once you come over the Cross Bay Bridge, I'm like, there must have been fucking loads of payphones. Then you brought a good point. Maybe they were hungry, and that's fair enough. Kid goes back to the house. John Lester. He starts screaming, "Hey, there's a bunch of N words on Cross Bay Boulevard. They're probably looking for shit to rob." There's a kid Riley there, and let me get into Riley. We talked about Riley too. He's probably the first most hated cooperator, rat, whatever you would, in Howard Beach before he made before there was Joe Messino, probably the biggest at the time. So he's there. He's one of like the ringleaders, and he gathers his troops. Among those troops is one kid Ladone, one kid Kern, and there's one kid Mike Perot. They all get into the car, and when they get into the car, they drive all the way. By this time, they drive to New Park Pizza, which is on the other side. And the one car had the one girl in the car. They drove her. Apparently, they were gonna drive home, but she stayed in the car, probably scared to death. You know what I mean? You got a picture. She was 16 at the time, and she got stuck there. They go for pizza. They come out. These three black men. They come out, and all of a sudden they're rounded up in a semicircle by these young white men. The N word, the explicits, everything going around, and being really, really, and they start circling like a pack of wolves, and they start hitting. The one kid Grimes has a knife, so when he's pulling the knife, they like, well, they were like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe not this guy, and he just takes off. He does the 100-yard dash. Okay, they didn't even he took off. The other two, Cedric Sanford, he's like 36 years old. He's not pretty quick on his feet. And Michael Griffith's there too. They end up getting hit with bats. And running at the same time. They go to this one side of this street, and they get hit and everything. They get Sanford good. They start hitting him with pipes, lead pipes, bats, and tree limbs. The poor guy, like, yo, he actually looks at the Lester kid and goes, hey, I got a son like you. Please don't kill me. And they're still hitting the poor guy. He goes across the street, and he thinks he's getting away. He's trying to climb a fence, and there they go again. They let him go. And you hear a thump. According to Sanford, he hears a thump. And nobody's around after that. He's bleeding, bumped up. Both his eyes are fucking swollen. When he gets to the 106 precinct, or they come there, they see, they put the report. But what was the thump?
Yeah, so the thump is basically why this case. Now, I have a premonition that this thing might have blew up regardless, but this event, how it ended is, as Frank mentioned, the thump. So you mentioned Grimes gets away first. Sanford is getting lumped up. He ultimately is going to break free of this situation. Michael Griffith, he finds a hole in a fence. What he decides he's going to do, he's going to go through this fence. However, this fence is leading to the Belt Parkway. Right now, it is after 1, and he's going to make a run into the parkway, and he's going to get struck by a vehicle. That vehicle was driven by 24-year-old court officer Dominic Bloom. Now, after Bloom hits Griffith, he claims he pulls over a little while down. He looks back. He doesn't see anything. He goes home. He drives his girlfriend home. What came out in court is that he did go back to the scene with his dad to see what exactly happened. And by the next day, they had this guy, Dominic Bloom. They had his car. He talked about what happened. And what happened was Michael Griffith lost his life right there in the Belt Parkway, running away from a mob that was essentially ready to viciously beat him as they had just did to Sandiford. And he did also get hit during this melee by New Park Pizza. Initially, with the Bloom situation, the guy that hit him, just to give you a backstory on him, they tried to form this narrative later on that he was somehow with the mob and he was on the highway driving and intentionally hit Griffith. Mathematically, scientifically, however you want to put it, impossible that would be the situation, considering, the way the highway situated. A lot of things go into it. It was an accident. Ultimately, he would be, exonerated of anything. He would have nothing to do with it except for being the unfortunate gentleman who was driving his car on Belt Parkway that early morning.
Yeah. I do remember that, and the civil rights leaders that were there, Maddox and of course Sharpton and all that, they wanted blood on this kid, and he had
Yeah,
nothing to do. They even asked him if he knew any of these kids involved. He said, "I never seen these kids ever. I was just coming back from work." And
yeah.
they tried to write that pony a little bit, but it
Yeah, and he
wasn't
was a
going
court
nowhere.
officer, he was a
Yeah.
court officer, his dad was a cop, so he was just this young guy who was, what it looked like was kinda just doing the right thing with his life, and he got into this fucked up situation.
The next day, these guys are already told on. The people are told on them already. They know who they are. They go to their house. They first go to Ladon's house, and the cops do the 106. The mother said, "Nah, my son couldn't be there. He was working. That's what he stuck with." And then he went with, "Yeah, you know what? I actually was there, but I didn't do nothing." Then another kid pops up. The kid Kern, and this is around the 21st of December. This was the 20th, so about a day and a half after, and he basically says, "I was there, but I didn't do nothing either." Mike Perone, he went with his dad, and he was like, "Well, I swung a bat, but I didn't hit nobody, and I had an accident," which I'll get to because I actually knew Mike on the street, and he said, "I didn't chase nobody. I had a bum leg from an accident," and he actually did, and that's what kind of saved him at the end. And then there was the Lester kid who actually gets arrested. They don't even bring him in. He gets arrested real like one of the first. And I believe his comments got him arrested. He came in there and he was like, "I'll tell you what I did." He goes, "But I don't rat on my friends." So back to like what's been going on in that neighborhood, the kind of like mob mentality. He goes, "I don't do that stuff, but I'll tell you what I did." And he asked the district attorney, and they asked him, "Well, you know what you're here for, right?" So he says something to the effect, listen to this. He goes, "Does this have to do with the N words the other night on Cross Bay?" And they're like, "Yeah," and they just knew right now. They labeled him the ringleader. I don't know if he was, if he wasn't. It seemed like the Riley kid more was like the guy who was the ringleader. He told on everybody. You know how that story goes. Being one of the first biggest rat at Howard Beach at the time. People hate him. His father was a cop, I believe, or his family was, and they moved to Florida right after that. But let's get back to that. So we got that, and then there's demonstrations. What do you remember that, Brett?
Yeah, of course, this is gonna be, demonstrations are gonna following this, but back to, like, what you were saying before as far as all the guys involved. Overall, there's about 12 people that are brought in on this, and there's 3 right away that they key in on, and those are the guys who are ultimately gonna suffer, the heaviest, conviction for this. 17-year-old Lester, Jason Ladone, 17, and Scott Kern, 19. They're the ones that initially get charged. They're throwing murder charges at a manslaughter charge. They're really hitting them hard right off the bat with this stuff. And ultimately, like you said, you get Riley becomes a rat. You got Perone being brought in also, which we'll get to what happens with him. And I know you have some personal stories
No,
on
no, no,
him.
not a bad way. I knew the kid.
No, I know.
His family, and I'm not going to mention who. He's also was somebody who grew up with his family involved in that other life. So we had mutual friends there too. I haven't seen him in forever, though, and I hope he's doing okay. But back to his case, there was a trial after, and he was the only one that got acquitted, and the reason for that was because he was in a apparently a moped accident, and whatever happened, and we had a gym teacher who went to bat for him. This guy, Scalfaro, and apparently he went over there and told him, "Listen, he missed gym all year. The kid can't run," and that got him acquitted. So he kind of locked out. The others not so lucky.
Yeah, I want to go back to Lester though, because John Lester, because he has the nickname Johnny English. So
Right.
explain to everybody why that is.
Well, he's born in England, and actually, after he actually gets convicted of manslaughter, I believe he does a 10-year bid, and then they deport him. That I know, but because he was English. But you should have seen they were bringing this kid like there was 2 guys that were donning the freaking front pages back at the time. One of them was, of course, the Don himself. But that after. it was John Lester, babyface assassin, ringleader, all that. They really gave it to him good. The media did, and so did the groups, the demonstrations. He was public enemy number one on that on in New York at the time. So I'm surprised he only got what he got. But unlike the Brooklyn case, the Bensonhurst case, this was more of a. It could have been tried as a felony murder, but at the same time, which is a felony that leads it to a murder, which that's what happened. But he got caught with a manslaughter case, and then like the Bensonhurst case was just, hey, I don't like you, and I'll shoot you right through him. And that Joey Farmer kid, Yusef Hawkins was the other guy, and the victim. So,
Scott Kern, he would be sentenced to 6 to 18 years.
mhm,
Jason Ledone received 5 to 15 years.
right,
John Lester received 10 to 30 years. And then
yeah.
everyone else involved, community service, stuff like that. I mean, as you mentioned, Perone gets off. Riley becomes public enemy number one because he kind of breaks down how the whole situation happened. And
Well,
as
he
far as
becomes a
Riley
public
goes, I
enemy
mean,
number one in the neighborhood. But I
yeah, but
mean,
he was, with court testimony, if you look at it, I mean, he was instigating this shit too.
I think he was the man. I'm surprised they even gave him a deal. This was in the feds. Well, this guy they actually asked for the bat. All right,
Right.
he asked for Kern's bat because I swing harder. Give me that bat.
Exactly.
I'll show you how it's done. That kind of fucking attitude. So I don't know. Regardless, the outcome was what it was. The demonstrations in Cross Bay Boulevard at the time, they were crazy.
Don't you talk to nobody about rape, because y'all rape people for 400 years. That's why we got light-skinned Negroes. You want to use the gun, we'll use the gun. You understand? Don't forget.
And that's what it is. Yes, you don't scare nobody.
Bring it up. Bring it up.
Got a lot of
course,
that.
yeah. I mean, you
How
had
was
a
Sleep
lot
Have
of
You Heard? This is not Johannesburg. All the fucking. They brought it. You know what I mean?
yeah, you had a lot of black activists funneling into Howard Beach, which
Tons.
obviously, you know, whether they have a right to be there or not, they're there to protest. But you have another certain element that already lives in Howard Beach that doesn't want them there. So you get this whole clash going on, people arguing with each other. This guy's getting interviewed saying they shouldn't be here or whatever else is going on. This guy's being interviewed, talking about, oh, this is like the civil rights era all over again. New York is still racist. Al Sharpton shows up. Al Sharpton shows up and has a slice of pizza at New Park Pizza. He's like,
Yeah.
I'll go eat pizza wherever we want. We'll go eat pizza. It turns into this whole thing.
He goes,
And
yeah, right. He goes, this is not the '60s. We black people eat pizza anywhere they want, especially New York. Of course, of course. And look,
yeah,
man, not everybody in Howard Beach is bad people.
of course
Then
not.
or today,
Right.
But a lot of their lives got disturbed. The people have nothing to do with this shit. They didn't ask for this, and God rest in peace, Michael Griffith, the victims. I think Cedric Sanford died not too long ago, and so but there's a lot of good people involved that don't deserve the bad rap. And you ever watch Chris Rock go to Howard Beach and his Chris Rock special? Check it out, people. It's pretty.
Yeah.
He brings light of a bad
Trying to
situation.
change a Cross Bay Boulevard into a Tupac Shakur Boulevard. To a Tupac Shakur Boulevard.
Why?
He wants to change Cross Bay into Tupac Shakur.
So with Lester, this is an interesting case because this is a guy who actually comes to the United States when he's already a teenager and he lands in Howard Beach. He's got this British accent, right? So it's very exotic, right? And he's entering into like this mob neighborhood. And what they say about people who have a disadvantage, maybe they become tryhards,
Sure. Yeah,
Right.
handicaps we call them, but of course.
Yeah, so an interesting life for somebody like that. And you know what? If you guys look into it, by the time he is on trial, there is photos with him with men who, let's say, became future made man in a certain mafia family. And there is reports of him being friends with these young up and comers. at the time. So, it seems like he fell into a wrong crowd. Now, he would get released from prison in the early 2000s, and he would be deported back to Wales, United Kingdom. He came here as a teenager and he did what he did. So he earned his deportation out of the United States of America. He would ultimately take his own life in 2017.
Yeah, yep, he did. Tragic. It's tragic. It's another New York story. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're here for. On a
Yeah.
lighter note, let's talk about the good times and back. And if anybody remembers 1986 and my favorite team in the universe, it's the New York Mets. You remember that?
Well, I wasn't around to see it, but I'm pretty aware of the history. I grew up in a New York
You're
Mets
old.
household. I grew up in a New York Mets household. I've
Sure.
been a lifelong Met fan. As a
And people,
kid, my teams were the mid to late 90s teams, and then, flowing into the Jose Reyes, David Wright era. Um,
sure.
but, being a kid and
Kind of like me. I mean, you guys didn't win anything when you became a fan. And when I became a fan in 1979, because I was torn, I think the first game I went to was a Met game. Me and an old buddy, ex-buddy of mine, his aunt took us to the game. And it was, I remember Pat Zachary had a fight with Ron Say, and it was great. And they sucked. The 79-80 freaking Mets were horrible. So I suffered. All Lee Mazzilli was the drawer back then. So but he was bigger than God, because it was Lee Mazzilli was Italian and not knowing how shitty this team was. And then the two best things that ever happened to the New York Mets organization were born. One was Darryl Strawberry in that order, and then Dwight Gooden. And before you know it, we were contending. We got Gary Carter, the kid, back on the team with the catcher. We were putting a great team together, great pitching staff. Keith Hernandez we got from St. Louis. They loaded him off. I think they always wanted to ever since his little scandal, but that's okay. He's one of those players, Keith Hernandez, and if anybody would agree or disagree, let me know. He should be in the Hall of Fame. One of the best first basemen ever.
no, I agree too with, with the amount of gold gloves, with the MVP, with his lifetime batting average has to be, I haven't looked at it, but I'm pretty
I
sure
think
it's
it's like
300.
298. Okay,
Close to
and
300.
listen,
Okay.
because I looked at it not too long ago. It's not that I'm nice
Right.
like that. I know I have a good memory, but no, it was like 298, I believe.
Over
I don't know
2,000
what he
hits, I
did.
believe, too.
I don't know what he did, but he did something to piss him off. They had Wally Backman on second. I remember the shortstop was they platooned between Elster and Santana, and then the
Santana.
outfield Dykstra. They had and Mookie out there in center. And left was Kevin Mitchell. And if I forgot somebody, I'm sorry, but third baseman was Ray Knight, and that was the team. That was the '86 team. But before '86, me and my buddies, we used to take the 58 B58 from Fresh Pond Road all the way to the last stop or close to the last stop by Flushing Meadow Park. Walk the park and watch double headers for $1.50. You think you could do that anymore?
Hell no.
Yeah, we be in the nosebleed, sneak down. Nobody went to see the Mets, especially during September. I was like, "Why fucking U.S. Open was right there?" I'm like, "Why do all these people want to see freaking tennis? This is where it's at. Major
Yeah, when I
League
was a kid
Baseball."
they still had the, bring your Pepsi bottle to the game and sit in the bleachers for free, whatever they used to have that promotion. It was like Thursday or Friday, whatever night it was.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah. No, I mean, and the more the Mets sucked, the lesser people that would show up. So it was rewarding when they won in '86. Are we really happy? That Game Six set the tone in 1986 with that ball going right underneath Bill Buckner's legs.
yeah, yeah, behind the bag.
Yeah,
Night
and that
scores and
just
the
set
Mets
the
win it.
tone. I knew that day, even as a kid, I knew even if we didn't win Game Seven, which I felt we were gonna anyway. I felt that game right there gave me the most fulfillment as a Met fan that I ever had or I'm ever going to have in my life. You got to remember they went in '73. They played the A's, and that was a Reggie Jackson fueled Oakland A's team, and they lost in '69. I was born in '70, so boom. That was it, 86. Now I hope, because we're filming this during the Mets Dodgers series, that they're down 2-1. I hope they come out good this one. This will be nice. I would love to see the Mets win again. But that was it. Do you remember? You don't remember much? You weren't there, but do you at least remember the 2000 series?
Well, of course, yeah, I remember the 2000 series. I mean, those were my guys basically when I was a kid. But with the '86 thing, it's like being a Met fan. It's like you don't. I mean, you have moments, but you don't have like those team achievements like World Series. So, the Mets have a habit, and any other team has a habit where they haven't won a lot of world championships. They hold on to one for so long because they have. So, when I'm a kid, 86, 86, 86, 86, that's all you hear about, 86, 86. Basically that's all we heard about. But another thing with that team, Frank, is that, you had a good mix of the young up and coming guys, and then you had a good mix of the veterans, and you had a good mix of guys who liked to party. So, I mean,
Oh
these guys
yes.
with the blow, with the drinking. I mean, you have Doc and Strawberry, these young men who got the world by the balls.
Oh yeah.
Gary Carter's the veteran. From what I hear, he was always quiet. He went to his hotel room, did his thing, was a family man. But a lot of these guys were into partying, and I think that certainly goes into the legend of that team and those characters. And it also speaks to maybe why they weren't as successful as they should have been. I mean, they could have been a team that won 2 or 3 World Series, or at least went to a couple of World Series after that, but didn't end up that way, man. Didn't
Yeah,
end
there
up
was a
that way.
lot of discord. And you got to remember, it wasn't like baseball today. 6 teams make the playoffs in a freaking league, and 12. All in all, back then there was still the you had to be the best in your division, and then you had to play for the pennant, and then so there was only 4 teams that made the playoffs back when the Mets did that. So they'd gotten in second place. I remember one time against St. Louis, edged them out by 1 game, I think, or 2. I think that was in to be quite clear. I think that was 87, and then 88. I think they played the Dodgers and they lost for the pennant. That was the Kirk Gibson year. So, yeah, a lot of things weren't going for themselves. The drug problems, they had to get rid of Kevin Mitchell, and not because Kevin Mitchell had a drug problem, as much as their better players did. They all hung out together, and he went to San Francisco and hit. Him and Mark McGuire ended up hitting the most home runs in the '80s decade, which it was not a juice ball at all. He hit 49 home runs with the San Francisco Giants. You believe that? And so did
Yeah.
Mark McGuire. Those two right there hit the most home runs out of any players in the major leagues back then. So there was a lot of that going on. At one point, Strawberry wanted to go back home. They Gooden was keeping on getting messing up, and a couple of other players were getting old, and that was it. The team was done. But there was a lot of other good pitchers too, if you remember, on that team. There was Sid Fernandez, Rick Aguilera. Cone came later.
You had Ron Darling coming up, Bobby
Ron
Ojeda,
Darling. Yeah, and they had a really good team.
of
They
course,
had a really good
Orozco. The final pitch.
he was your closer.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep. And yeah, nah, they were very, very talented group, but also had a lot of problems. You had Lenny Dykstra there too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think historically, it's one of those teams that transcends even just New York. It's just one of those teams, right? The team
Mm,
that they make documentaries about. How that whole thing came about, which they've done, obviously. Um, but interesting time. But you mentioned the 2000. I do remember the 2001. Those were my guys. Alfonso was my favorite player as a kid. I loved
yeah.
Edgardo Alfonso. Of course, Ray Ordonez, Piazza, Ventura came on board. And yeah, those were like I guess the kind of the late 90s to the early into the 2000s is what I remember most as a kid watching a lot of games.
Hmm.
John Olerud, I was a big John Olerud fan.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He
At
was fucking
Washington State.
he was great,
He's
Olerud.
actually my neighbor. But yeah,
No
yeah,
way.
yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. He
Always
lives
wore
out
a
here.
helmet,
Do
always wore a
you
helmet.
do you know he's one of the most one of the best pitchers ever come out of college. He was like 17 and always something like that. He was a very good pitcher out in Washington State with the Cougars. Go Huskies. Anyhow, back
Yeah.
to back to not to get off, but do you know the song of the year was in 1986? Number
What
one
was it?
song, 86.
What was it?
Um, that's what friends are for. That one song that every time I hear, I want to throw my shoe out a window.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
good
So there you
times,
go.
oh bad times.
So what you? Yeah, I could have forgot about that one
Get
though.
stuck in the elevator for a while. Listen, that's Dionne Warwick. That's the one with like Elton John and whoever else is on that,
Gladys
right?
Knight and
Yeah,
somebody else. Maybe somebody could help us out.
yeah.
But that
So
was
that's
what else? So what else went on?
yeah, 86. So we got
86.
another infamous case, Frank. This is one that kind of took the country by storm, actually. But it occurs in 1986. It
Mm-hmm.
occurs in the New York City borough of Manhattan, and it is a case which becomes known as the Preppy Killer murder. It's funny you said something to me on the phone like this is the blueprint for all those stupid TV shows, where it's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah. I must have seen that story scenario on every crime show from like Law and Order and anything. I just
right,
like
right. It's also kind of we speak about the Howard Beach racial incident being like the OG like Howard Beach race case. Nowadays into the 90s and 2000s, and as of late, you hear about these creepy white fraternity kids. They're hazing their friends to death. They're
God.
assaulting women. They're assaulting women that are drunk. So this is kind of like also in that mold, also, where this idea is kind of at the forefront too. Not what the media portrays it to be at first, and we're going to get into that. This is a case about the preppy killer
Mm-hmm.
Robert Chambers and the death of Jennifer Levin. So
Yeah.
you remember this when it was happening, Frank? You were picking this up a little
Of
bit.
course. It was every. I also have that fucking creepy motherfucker um on Current Affair playing with that Barbie doll, twisting her neck and pretending he was twisting that poor young woman's neck. Who what a beautiful young woman. What a loss. What a loss. And that's
Right, right.
another guy that should have spent the rest of his life in jail. I,
That
I
was
just I
some
just
felon.
don't I just don't understand why people in general, and I'm not being I've had my own problems. We notice I'm a criminal, but leave women alone, guys. If they're not, if it don't work for you, walk away. That was a heartbreaking case.
Yeah, so let's get into it. I mean, this is the untimely death of 18-year-old Jennifer Levin, who on the morning of August 26, 1986, she would be discovered by a bicyclist in Central Park, half, disrobed and unconscious. She would ultimately be pronounced dead. Now, Levin, she was a girl who was a Long Island girl, but had lived in Manhattan at that time. Her father was a
Mhm.
real estate developer. She was attending a wealthy Upper West Side school known as the Baldwin School, where a lot of wealthy children attend. And she was ready actually soon to go off to Boston College. And that's kind of the theme of this whole case, this kind of like hoity-toity, like upper Manhattan preppy world, these preppy rich kids, right? And Robert Chambers, they're kind of seeing each other and they're having drinks on the Upper East Side. There's a bar that used to be on 84th Street and Second Avenue called Dorian's Red Hand. Used to be on the Upper East Side. I say used to be. I didn't even check if it was still there, but I doubt it. So they're kind of last seen there around 4 a.m. They make their way to Central Park, and something happens while they're there. When they discover Levin, they see that she has seemingly been strangled, and there's some compression to the neck. And they know this was done by somebody, of course, right? The next day, they're going to pick up Robert Chambers. And Robert Chambers, so let's get into who Robert Chambers is. So back then, Frank, do you recall like how they were painting him, like as some Upper East Side preppy kid, or like what do you
Yeah,
feel
he
like?
was more had a blue collar upbringing. I guess his dad was a detective or a police officer, just like I think like the Riley kid we just talked about. Um, am I correct?
Well, you're kind of correct in somewhat of a blue collar upbringing. His dad actually. So here's the story: his family dynamic, because Robert Chambers is picked up in connection to the death of Jennifer Levin, right? And then he's going to get charged with it. They're charging him with her homicide. This is going to turn into a thing where, according to Chambers, this was some freaky affair that they were having in the park, something of a sexual connotation. Things got out of hand. And that's how, she lost consciousness. She died. And I guess he just left her there. That's his story. He's sticking by it. But after this happens, we have this thing in the media going on where they start delving into this whole Upper East Side, like preppy kids, right? And they're basically painting Robert Chambers as some wealthy kid who is privileged. And first of all, his dad he worked for some MCA records. He was some kind of records guy. But his dad was a really bad alcoholic, like really
Okay.
bad. His mother, Phyllis, divorced the father. And they originally came out of Jackson Heights, Queens. Now, his mother, Phyllis, was a nurse. She managed to get a nice gig as a private nurse for these upper class people, right? This woman worked so hard that she was able to actually get an apartment on the Upper East Side in around 1980. And she basically wanted to mold her son into, how these kids were, like the children of these kids that she was like taking care of their parents or their grandparents, this whole Upper East Side, upper echelon society, right?
She meant well for a kid. He was a scumbag. She tried to do the right thing by
Right,
him.
right, right, right. And truth be told, Robert Chambers did, they said his IQ was over 120, so a lot of this stuff in the beginning, he was getting scholarships, but it's also like his mother working hard to get him a good education. But what happens with Chambers is he's constantly getting kicked out of schools. He's becoming like weird, antisocial. He's experimenting with drugs and getting kicked out of he got kicked out of a private school, and he was in a boarding school in Connecticut for a little bit. Didn't work out. He went over there. He ended up getting expelled from the Browning School in Manhattan for drugs, and he was like stealing shit from teachers. Ultimately, he would graduate from York Prep School. These are all great schools. And he would go to Boston, do a semester at college, flunked out over there, made his way back to New York City. Just an all-around kind of preppy kid, but also with a criminal side to him. I don't know if you spent a lot of time on the Upper East Side in your day, Frank.
No. No, not really. I was more of a downtown person. But yeah, no, I get it.
And I know somebody that knew him a little bit, somebody who has been on my channel a little bit. He's a famous graffiti writer, RD357, Robert Dyer. He's been an Upper East Side guy forever. And
Shout out to Robert.
shout out to RD, yeah. And he was telling me basically, he was saying Robert Chambers was a part of this clique of like preppy, like, tough guys or whatever. They called themselves the Budweiser Boys. That's what he said to me. And he also said to me that, him and his friends were like the real criminals, right? They were really like robbing shit, doing graffiti, going all around the city. That's all they knew. They came from poverty. And they wanted to do better for themselves. A lot of these kids were from public assistance housing or rent controlled buildings in the Upper East Side where their families been there forever. And he was like, oh, we were hoping to do better with our lives. And these fucking preppy kids that had all the money, they were trying to make their lives worse, So it was a weird dichotomy. It was a weird clash of culture going on there. And Robert Chambers fell into the bad fucking side of that.
And a lot of these kids were like into that cocaine as well, especially in those preppies and those preppy inner circles, especially in the 80s.
Of course, yeah. And then, a lot of things would come out. You mentioned before that a video did come out. It was like a house party with a bunch of his friends where he's that
did it for me. That did it for me with that guy. And then his defense, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not too familiar with this case, but correct me. And I want you to know we improvise in the show. We just go as we go. And if I'm wrong, he used the rough sex defense. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, it was some kind of like sex act that got out of control, and this is how this girl died, basically.
Yeah, and it's sad on so many levels, and I heard and then after he got what happened to him? He got tried, he got convicted,
well,
or
it's interesting because two things would come back to bite him. Of course, he would get in trouble for this Jennifer Levin thing, And he got in trouble for something else at that time also. He got caught up in being associated with a number of burglaries that were happening on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And how this actually came out, and this is even the more bizarre story. In 1985, a young guy by the name of David Filiow, he goes into a Columbia dorm in Manhattan, violently stabs and assaults a college student. He ends up
Mm.
getting picked up for that. They then connect him to a number of robberies. Somebody comes out and fingers Robert Chambers for the same robberies. Robert Chambers then tries to sell David Filiow out for these robberies, saying, "Oh, he forced me to do them. He's a violent guy." So essentially, Robert Chambers gets caught up with this lunatic who ends up getting 20 years himself for this Columbia dorm assault, running around Manhattan robbing apartments with this guy, right?
So
So not only is he doing what he's doing, but like we said, he's getting into real criminality with
right.
a bad element. And I believe Philly was actually from Roosevelt Island, which is an island between. It's on the East River, between
Yeah, it's
Queens and
right there by
Manhattan.
61st
Yeah,
Roosevelt. It was right where Scores was, right by the Queensboro Bridge or the
right,
59th Street Bridge, whatever you want to call it.
right,
Yeah, you know what though? In those inner circles, like where there's a lot of rich people, you always get those bad kids that get together and then they do things. They're rich kids that just want to do bad things, and not only that, some of them might want they get hungry with what they want, and they like that Bling crew out in L.A. And I don't know so much about them, but you've
right. The
heard of
bling
them.
ring. Yeah,
Yeah, they knew their victims, and they took advantage, and you got that in those inner circles, especially with the rich people.
yeah. So ultimately, with Robert Chambers, what would happen in trial, Frank? It's like the trial would begin in '88, and what would happen is, like you said, that they have this thing going on with did he do it intentionally? Was it actually this bizarre sex ritual? And it kind of became a thing where it's like the jury really were having trouble deciding how to go
That's
with
what
this.
it's called. It's called raising doubt. You know,
Yeah,
they knew he was guilty, but
right, right.
they wanted to find reasonable doubt, and it's sad though. And what did he end up getting anyway?
Yeah. So what eventually, because of all that drama, the prosecution says, "Listen, we'll give you a plea, first degree manslaughter, just plead guilty and get this over with," which he accepts, and he gets a 5 to 15 year sentence. Now, running concurrent with that is a 5 to 15 year sentence for the tens of thousands of items that he stole from these apartment burglaries, which is a lot of money. These are Upper East Side, they're stealing jewelry, they're stealing a lot of expensive
Mhm.
shit. It all, but so he actually does the full 15 on that, Frank.
Oh wow, yeah, rightfully so. He should have did 30, if not more. I mean, it's just, and what comes out after too. He didn't go quietly.
Well,
I think
this
in
is
jail he
yeah,
was not a model citizen at all.
yeah.
There was a lot to be taken out of that case, but you know, I don't want to be hypocritical either.
Yeah,
So
numerous yeah, you're right though. No, he did have a lot of infractions in prison, and,
he was
that's
he.
you know
Go ahead, that's my bad.
no, I'm saying that definitely went into it. Plus, he had the 2 concurrent, that didn't help either, I'm sure.
Yeah, fuck this guy. Let's get rid of this story.
Well well
Get
well, we
me,
gotta
he
we
get
gotta
me
stay with
sick
him for a little
already.
bit. We gotta stay with him for a minute because something else is gonna happen.
I hope
He's
it's
gonna
bad.
he's gonna get out of prison in the early 2000s. He's gonna return to the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And Chambers gets this great idea that in this apartment with his girlfriend, he's gonna start slinging blow. That's what he's gonna do.
Oh, so he's a regular Sammy Gravano there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in August of 2008, he would plead guilty to, selling these things, and they would throw 19 years at him.
So he did 19 years after?
Well, last year he was released. So he did 15, Frank. He did 15 for the 11 and he did
Uh-huh.
15 for the blow. So 30 years of this guy's life he has spent incarcerated.
So karma's your bitch. Fuck him. And that happened to OJ too. Not to go off track. I mean, so it
He
is
is
what it is.
currently around. He is still, of course, on parole. We've seen some photos of him popping up in Manhattan. I think one came out of Queens. So he's around somewhere. Robert, if you're listening, let's have a talk.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So that's just another infamous case. I mean, we have the Howard Beach racial incident. We have of course, the Miracle Mets, the Amazing Mets. We
Yes.
have Robert Chambers. And, I think before we end,
Do
Frank, we got
you have any honorable mentions?
we got some honorable mentions. We're going to go into the world of organized crime, Frank. We got a lot of things popping off in
I
1986.
take the fifth. Obviously, I know some people are gonna eat that up and stick it back in my face, but it's
Well, no,
cool.
listen, these are infamous events. We're not digging
Sure.
deep into the biographies and everything. These are infamous.
And we leave the active guys alone. I mean, we could talk about them, but only
Right,
if it's
right.
fair.
Hey, listen, these are,
We're not gonna open up any cases for anybody.
of course
Wouldn't think
not.
about it.
Of course not. These are monumental incidents that we are going to be speaking of in the annals of New York City criminal history.
All right,
April
shoot.
13th, April 13th, 1986. Frankie DeChico gets blown up on 86th Street,
Ooh,
right
yeah.
across the street from the Veterans and Friends, across from Tommaso, right over there. A car bomb allegedly placed by one Herbert Pate as the gentleman down the block at the 19th hole looked on. Apparently, a bomb intended for John Gotti. They say, oh, mistaken identity, but does it really matter? I mean, when you think about it, if they saw Frankie DeChico, they already placed the bomb. It's like, well, good enough. At least we got the underboss. And obviously, Frank, this
Mhm.
is stemming from the chin. Obviously, Gas and Amusa are in control now. And this is a little Castellano revenge, huh?
Well, wait a minute. According to Georgie the Chico, God rest his soul, as well. It might have been Sammy that had something to do with that.
Oh, butter ass. I know that he killed him. I know in
Well,
my
yeah,
heart he killed him.
yeah. Come on, we know that was that was for killing a boss. That was a commission call. Well, not a full commission call, but we all know how that story goes. It's old news. I don't want to have the other content creator just go. I already
No,
knew
no,
that.
listen. This is 86, baby. This is 86. We're gonna
So
move
let's
on to the
pretend
next
like we're
one.
in 1986.
We're gonna move
By the
on to
way,
the
do
next
you
one.
know where your child is? Remember that?
It's 10 o'clock.
It's
Do
10
you know
o'clock.
where your children are? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
listen. We're already past it. We're gonna move on to the next one. All right.
Okay.
Let's go over. We're going chronologically here.
Okay.
Let's go to September 14th, 1986, in the area of East 70th Street in Brooklyn. Anthony
Mm-hmm.
Gas Pipe Casso is shot by Bob Bering, Nicky Guido, and Jimmy Heidel. Now, 86, we might want to just mention that this is also a time where Gas and Vic are taking over, and they're forming alliances with the mob cops, and a lot of things are being put into motion as far as where those guys are going to head. But Casso gets shot.
Should have killed that bastard. A lot of people would be still living. Especially the victim, Nikki Guida. God rest his soul
Yeah, we'll
as
get to
well.
that. Yeah, another fucking. We're gonna do an episode on these mafia.
There's a
You want
lot
to
of
call them
people, and we won't,
innocent.
and you will not on this on this program. We will talk about Alan Kaiser anytime you want, and his sister's allowed to do so as well. If you don't like it, fuck off.
Yeah, we talked about doing an episode talking about all of these.
Like that, I just had to
You
put
want to
that
call
in.
them innocent victims. You want to call collateral damage. Whatever you guys want. We'll do an episode on this.
That woman could talk about her brother all she wants.
Yeah, we'll do an episode talking about him and a lot of women, children. We're going to talk a lot about that on
Mm-hmm.
episode. So, with this, as we said, Gasper gets shot, and is Angelo Ruggiero behind this? Anyway, he does get shot, and this is going to lead to a tragic incident. As a result of this, obviously, they have Louis Ippolito, Stephen Caracappa in their pocket. These are the mob cops, right? This whole
Mm-hmm.
thing is getting underway. They are going to first grab Heidel physically. They're going to abduct him, bring him to a garage, and ultimately deliver a Jimmy Heidel nephew, apparently, of one Marino. And he's going to lose his life. He famously talks about this incident in the Bradley interview he does, if everybody knows that interview on 60 Minutes. He famously talks about this individual running down how many times he shot him and everything
Yes.
else.
I shot him a couple of times. I didn't torture the kid. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything like that. I shot him a couple of times. The kid died.
What's a couple?
As a result of this, the Mafia cops, as I said, there was a Nicky Guido involved in the actual Casso shooting. And the Mafia cops are going to get the address of Nicky Guido. However, on Christmas Day of 1986, it is not going to be the Nicky Guido they're looking for. They will, and listen, who did it? There's ideas out there.
It's just another tragic story
An
of
innocent man got killed
the
on
mob.
Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Christmas Day.
Without,
Checking out his new car. And if that doesn't make anybody frustrating, if that doesn't show you the level of depravity of like even guys wearing the badge, Cara Kappa Eppolito, and of course we don't even have to get into gas pipes depravity, but this is like one of the more tragic ones when I think of these people who have lost their lives innocently to this nonsense.
anytime an innocent person is caught in these crossfires of organized crime, or anybody's organized crime, it's just tragic. It's sad. It happens more than people think. Not necessarily the Italian mob, but it happens in a lot of other mobs as well. It's just sad, and it's hard. It's hard to swallow. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And finally, on November 19th of 1986, we got some convictions from the commission trial, the infamous Mafia commission trials, right? November 19th, 1986, these guys are convicted. Ultimately, in 87, they're going to receive their sentences. So we got Tom Mix, we got Ralph Scopo, we got Gennaro Langella, Jerry Lang, we got Carmine Persico, we got Christy Tick, we got Tony Ducks, we got Fat Tony Salerno. They're all getting 100 years and a shit ton of fines. And we got Bruno Indelicato. He's going to get 40 years. Do you remember this, Frank?
And do I remember the commission case? Yeah, I mean, as much as I want to remember as a 16-year-old, but not so much the Indelicato get the 40 years, but and I'll get into that too, because and it's like I said, if it's gonna, I just think he got a little bit blackballed on that case, a lot actually, and the Bruno guy, but I remember Tony Solano spitting at the cameras, all that crap.
1986, ladies and gentlemen, we had the Howard Beach racial incident. We had the Preppy Killer, Robert Chambers. We had the Mets and some mob honorable mentions, some organized crime events that transpired in 1986. Of course, there's an endless amount of events, but these are pretty monumental, I would say.
Yeah, no, it was like there was a lot going on in '86. Even musically, I can't believe that we just could. That song, it doesn't even come in my mind. When I remember music in '86, it was all freestyle. Anybody remember that? Shout out to all you freestyle crazy people. What else I was gonna say? I said, if you guys we're picking a year actually, not a decade. So if you guys have any ideas out there and you enjoyed this show, and maybe you want us to go through a year, maybe your birthday, whatever, let us know, and we'll take it from there. But make sure I was alive, or yeah, or Brett at that.
Right.
But yeah, great show, man.
No, this was fun. Hey guys, listen, this is episode 2. We're gonna get better. Right now, this is audio. If you're watching it on YouTube, I am throwing up images. So for those people that like to sit on their couch and actually watch something, you'll notice during these episodes, I am putting up imagery for you guys to enjoy. Ultimately, we'll be in a situation where Frank will be on camera, I'll be on camera, we'll get a little studio vibe going. This is only episode 2. We're only going to get better. This has been the year 1986. Go check out our first episode if you haven't seen that. Leave some comments down below. Let us know if you have any suggestions.
And before we go one more last thing. You gotta remember, and when I talk about people I knew in life, I wasn't in the music industry. I was in I wasn't a major league. I wasn't a baseball player, a basketball. I wasn't an athlete, and I wasn't in Hollywood. So when I do talk about the people I know, it's probably a lot of people gonna frown or raise eyebrows or what. But at one time, a lot of these people were friends of mine, and and I know you read a lot of things about them being certain ways, but and I'll discuss that. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not. You got to understand. Like for example, I knew the kid Mike Perone from the area. Um, Met him a couple of times, more than a couple of times, and we're going to be discussing it. And it's not. And I thought he was a good kid back then. I still probably think he's a good man today. So that might cause a stir, but whatever.
All right, Frank. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.